Hello, I hope you're fine and well. This is Gibson versus Fender, but it's not a comparison which one is the better one. I just give you the information about the differences of both guitars, then you can make your own decision. Fender has a 25.5 neck that's measured between the nut and the bridge or the saddles. That means 25.5 between here and here. The Gibson guitars have a scale of 24.75. That's also measured from the nut to the saddles to the bridge. And the Gibson is a bit shorter. That means it's a bit more comfortable to play because there is less tension on the strings. The fretboard, traditionally on a Fender, it's maple. Maple, it's a really hard wood, so the sound goes straight in and it makes a Fender sound a bit brighter than a rosewood what's on the Gibson guitars. Fender, at the beginning they had a radius of 7.25. That means we're just talking of the fretboard, and that means the fretboard was quite round. As higher the number, as flatter is the fretboard. So the early Fenders had the 7.25, that means the fretboard was quite rounded, and then they changed to 9.5, that was a bit flatter. The Gibson guitars have a 12 radius, that means it's quite flat compared to the Fender. The difference is if you have a 7 or a 9.5, it's comfortable for to play in chords, and a flatter radius, it's more comfortable for soloing, for bending the strings. That's clear. As flatter the fretboard is, as more comfortable is it for soloing. But I think Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, it's an endless list. Pink Floyd, all these guys, they played Eric Clapton, a 9.5 neck, and they never had any issues with soloing. But it's a bit more comfortable to play the strings. It's less tension on the string on a Gibson. It's a bit heavier. If you don't play every day, for a professional it doesn't make any difference, but for someone who uses the guitar rarely, then it's a Gibson a bit more comfortable. Now the neck. We're leaving the fretboard. The neck, it's just the opposite. A Fender is a bit narrower. The nut is 42 millimeters or 1.65 traditionally on a Fender. And it's only deep 0.800 a Fender. A Gibson has a bit a bigger, fatter neck. They have a 1.69 nut, that's 43 millimeters, and most Gibson has a 0900 or even thicker neck. So the neck itself is a bit beefier on a Gibson than on a Fender, and it depends also the shape. So usually a Fender neck, the neck for the hand, for the palm, is a bit more comfortable on a Fender, and because it's a bit narrower, it's a bit easier to reach the strings. So to push the strings, more comfortable on a Gibson, easier access on a Fender. The body of a Fender is poplar or older. Most bodies are made of older wood. The necks are made of maple. Then I believe the Strat from 59 on had some rosewood necks as well. But traditionally a Fender maple neck, hardwood, older body. But Fender used quite a lot of different wood. So the Gibson has traditionally a mahogany body, a maple top, arched, a bit rounded. mahogany neck, rosewood fretboard, or ebony fretboard, or ridge light. Ebony, ridge light on the higher end guitars, or rosewood on the standard lines. Gibson is a bit heavier. A Gibson standard, when we take the 50s, they were between 9 and 10 pounds. So a Gibson is around 4 to 4.5 kilos. There are even Les Pauls, they are 5 kilos heavier. Tele is around 8 to 8.5 pounds, so a Tele is around 3.8, 3.9 kilos, but they make now lighter models, Gibson and Fender. But I'm talking of the Les Paul, because the SG is completely different, but let's go through. So in 1950, the Broadcaster and the Esquire came on the market, now known as Telecaster, because of copyright problems. They had to rename the Tele into the Tele, the Broadcaster into the Telecaster. Then in 52, Gibson came on the market 2 years after Fender. After the Tele came the Les Paul, regular on the market, only made in gold top. Then a year later, in late 53, they started the custom models with ebony fretboard, a bit narrower neck, a bit more comfortable neck, so the customs are a bit better than the standards, but never had really the big success. Then they started the junior line, while the regular line never really succeeded. In the mid-50s they sold slightly over 2,000 Les Pauls per year, and then the famous 58, 59, 60, they sold altogether between 58, the Sunburst, because in the beginning of 58 they were still making the gold top, so they are 1958 Les Pauls in gold top, and then they changed in the middle of the year to Sunburst, 58, 59, 60s. Then they stopped the production because the lack of the success. From the custom they made, if you look through the 50s per year, between 300 and 400 guitars, while the junior line were sold in thousands and thousands of instruments. The Fender started in 54, the Stratocaster, and Leo Fender himself, he never learned to play a string instrument. He had the radio shop and started to repair amplifiers, and so he was keen to start a bit to produce prototypes of string instruments, lap steel, whatever, and then he wanted to start to make a guitar in a mass production, solid body guitar, less resonance to the amplifier. So he started with the Tele, but because he never learned to play a guitar, so Leo Fender was a smart man, so he gave out instruments to professional musicians and said, what do you want? What's important for you? Where I have to improve? And so of all this information he get back from professionals, he created the Strat, easier access to the upper frets. Leo Fender was a big fan of the car industry, and he wanted to make an affordable high-end product for the guitar players. So he found out, like Ford, you know, like on the bands when they produce a car. So he said, he saw, they make the body, they make the engine, the interior, the seats, and then at the end they put all together. So Leo Fender started, I mean, also the Tele had bolt-on necks, but then he improved that. So Leo Fender could make the neck, the body, and the electronics were built in the scratch plate, and at the end he just could put all together. So to produce a Fender was less expensive than to produce a Gibson in the classical wooden instrument style. So the Stratocaster had the body shape, was lighter than a Gibson, had a more comfortable neck. He changed from 725 to 295 the radius. And for professionals, the good thing was they could change the neck. You know, you unscrew, you can put a rosewood neck, a maple neck, whatever you want, or a different shape neck, because Fender makes some different necks. The V-shape, Eric Clapton plays a V-shaped neck. That's the Eric Clapton model, and that's probably the most comfortable neck on the market. Then they also produce a U-shape, a heavy fat neck like that one. That's even a thicker neck than a Gibson, and very, very comfortable. A great, great neck. So Fender listened to the musicians, and that's maybe the success, because 2 years ago Mooney, the CEO of Fender, said for the first time in history Fender produced over 1 million guitars in a year. And if you compare, Gibson is a bit higher priced because they build their guitars in the traditional way. They cut out the wood, and then they have to work on the whole instrument. They have to cover the fretboard, and they have to dye, they have to varnish, they have to scratch away the varnish from the binding, and then they put the electronics in the body. That's a lot of work. So a Gibson can't be sold for the same price as a Fender. I'm talking of the SG. Then when they stopped to produce the Les Paul, they started to produce in the 60s the SG. And now if you go in a guitar store, the standard SG has more or less the same neck as the Les Paul. But they have some special models or limited edition like that one, because in the late 60s Gibson wanted to produce the fastest guitar on the planet, and they advertised that way. So they narrowed the neck to a 155, that's 39 millimeters. And this is a guitar from 2016. This is a naked. They made in 2016 2000 guitars in the neck shape of the 68, 69. So that's a 155. It's only 0716. It's an extremely thin neck. It's a narrow neck, 24 frets, and instead of a 12 radius, a 14 radius. That means the fretboard is even flatter. So this is probably the fastest guitar I ever had. It certainly, from the speed, it plays in the league of Eddie Van Halen, Music Man, you know. And Music Man was always keen to build the fastest guitars. That's Steve Moore, Steve Lukather, Albert Lee. If you look, the Music Man players, they're all famous for being really fast, great guitar players. And Eddie Van Halen, one of the fastest guitar players in the 80s and 90s, he worked with Music Man. But this SG, the late 60s SGs, have such great necks. They're as fast playing, and it's a satin neck, so there is nothing that slows you down. So the SGs, and now the weight. The SG, that's the lightest guitars. It's lighter than any Fender. It's at 2.7 kilos. That's nothing. A standard, it's a bit heavier, but the standard SG is even maybe 100, 200 grams under a standard Stratocaster. So Les Paul is heavier than a Fender Tele or Strat. A Gibson SG is a bit lighter than a Fender Tele or Strat. Let's talk now about the electronics. So the biggest difference is from the mid-50s on, Zed Lover produced the humbucker, while Fender is famous for single coil pickups. Meanwhile, you can have, like here, that's a new Tele with humbuckers. You can have a Gibson with single coil, the P90s, famous by John Lennon, George Harrison, Paul McCartney, Keith Richards. It's nearly an endless row. The first Black Sabbath album, Iomi, played also an SG like that one, and with P90s, and that's heavy metal. Single coils are great pickups. The problem is a bit the noise they produce when you don't play. But now Fender makes noiseless pickups, single coils, so there is no problem. But also Fender has humbuckers, Gibson has single coil. The difference between a humbucker and the single coil is a humbucker is nothing else than two single coils together, and Zed Lover had the idea to turn one, so the electric field was stopped because it worked against each other, you know, so it stopped humming. But the bright sound was a bit lost, but they figured out how to solve that problem. So a humbucker sounds a bit more bluesy, heavy metal, darker, deeper. A single coil sounds more country, brighter, clearer. And that fits to the maple neck, so a Fender is a bit more, has a bit the brighter, higher sound than a Gibson. But if you take an SG with a P90, then it sounds like a Fender. If you take a Tele with humbuckers, it sounds with a rosewood neck, then it sounds nearly like a Gibson. Now the big discussion, the electronics are the most important, that gives the sound to the amplifier. And does it make any difference if the guitar is built on alder body, poplar or mahogany, whatever? No, that's because in a laboratory, when they put the guitar on a table, they take the sound, they play the string, and then it's exactly the same sound, because the electronics gives the sound to the amplifier, and you don't hear a difference of the wood. That's when the science, after the science, it doesn't make any difference. But it makes a big difference, because an instrument is a thing of feeling. You know, a B.B. King, how he played, or a Iomi, or a Ritchie Blackmore, everybody had a different approach to play his guitar. And when you play a guitar, then it makes a big difference for you, the feeling you have, because a Les Paul on your body, when it starts after, when you start playing after 10-15 minutes, it goes in your body, the feeling, the vibes, the vibration, and with that feeling you play different, the strings, so it makes a difference, the wood. And then also the vibration goes also to the pickup, so when the wood starts to live, and then it gives a different feeling, a different sound from a Fender than from a Gibson. And that's just the mojo, how we call it the mojo. So it's really important what wood, how a guitar is built. But in the science can't confirm that, because science is just how it sounds, and the same tone come out of the amplifier. But when you play, if you're a blues guy or a heavy metal guy, whatever, you need that feeling. Then it's really important what shape your guitar have, how heavy, how not, and the feeling that comes from the instrument in your body, that you can give it to the strings, and then to the amp, and then to the audience. So the wood is important, the electronics are important, how the guitar is shaped. So I let you to decide. For me, both guitars, I can't say I prefer the Fender or the Gibson. They're just two different DNAs, and I let you decide. Have a lovely day. Thank you. Bye.